You don't expect horror to unfold in a place where kids laugh. Not on a crisp October afternoon. Not in Havenwood, a town where people leave their doors unlocked and teachers wave to passing cars on their way to school. But on October 14, 1998, something happened at Havenwood Elementary that would stain the town's name for decades. At exactly 2:14 p.m., 2 kids vanished without a sound. It started like any other Wednesday. Mark Thompson packed lunch for his son, Leo, while Clara fixed Maya's hair into 2 neat pigtails. Leo, 8, was obsessed with baseball cards. Maya, 6, couldn't go anywhere without her butterfly hair clip and her favorite purple sneakers. They were a picture-perfect American family. Mark worked construction, good at his job, known to every local contractor from Crescent City to Eureka. Clara was a part-time nurse at Havenwood General. Their kids? Polite, funny, a little shy, but good kids. Real good. That morning, the kids hopped out of the family's old Ford Taurus with backpacks bouncing behind them. Leo ran ahead, Maya skipped after him. Clara waved and drove off. She never saw them again. At 2:15 p.m., the final bell rang. First graders poured back into their classrooms, giggling and dragging their muddy shoes down the linoleum hallways. Teachers were gathering coats and lunchboxes. But Ms. Pearson, Maya's teacher, noticed her seat was empty. Leo was missing too. At first, no one panicked. Maybe they went to the nurse's office. Maybe they were in the bathroom. But 5 minutes became 10. Then 20. By 3 p.m., the school was on lockdown. Police cruisers lined the street in front of Havenwood Elementary. Parents were told to wait outside. Clara showed up first, panicked, trembling. Mark arrived 10 minutes later, covered in drywall dust, looking like someone had knocked the wind out of him. That's when Officer Roman stepped onto the scene. Back then, Roman was still new to the force, only 3 years in, fresh out of the academy. But he had something most of the older guys didn't: Saber. Saber was a K9 German Shepherd, trained in tracking, drug detection, and crowd control. Roman and Saber had been partnered for about a year, but this was their first major case together. What neither of them knew was that it would also become the case that would shape the rest of their lives. Roman got the kid sent from a spare hoodie Maya had left behind. Saber's ears twitched as he sniffed it. Then the dog bolted. Roman followed fast as Saber darted across the playground, past the jungle gym and plastic slide. The dog paused briefly at the swing set. Maya had been there earlier, then headed straight toward the back fence. There was a narrow gap between the boards. Too small for an adult, just wide enough for a child. Saber squeezed through. Roman ducked under and came out into an overgrown lot behind the school. Weeds chest-high, broken glass, old tires. No cameras. No witnesses. Just silence. Saber kept his nose low to the ground. The trail led across the lot, and stopped cold at the edge of the road. Roman crouched beside the dog, heart pounding. Saber whined, scratched at the grass. Something shimmered under the brush. Roman picked it up. It was a butterfly-shaped hair clip. Blue, with a tiny chip in one wing. Clara burst into tears when she saw it. It was Maya's. She'd worn it that morning. The scent ended there. There were no skid marks. No tire prints. But the meaning was clear. This wasn't 2 kids wandering off. This was a planned abduction. For the next 72 hours, Havenwood turned into a war room. Volunteers combed the woods. Helicopters circled overhead. News trucks parked outside the elementary school, interviewing neighbors who could barely hold it together on camera. Roman and Saber worked around the clock. They followed leads from suspicious vans to distant bus stations. Nothing panned out. No one saw the kids leave. No one saw who took them. No ransom note came. No sightings. No security footage. It was as if Leo and Maya Thompson had been erased off the face of the earth. The only real clue? That hair clip. Roman bagged it personally. He didn't let anyone else touch it. He logged it, sealed it, and stored it in the department's evidence room. He didn't know why, but something in his gut told him it mattered. 3 weeks passed. The town mourned in quiet ways, candlelight vigils, teddy bears by the school fence, handwritten notes taped to swing sets. Clara and Mark stopped showing up to public events. The marriage that had once seemed so solid began to fracture under the pressure. And the police? They ran out of leads. Eventually, the case went cold. Roman kept working, drugs, DUIs, bar fights, but the Thompson kids were never far from his mind. Every now and then, someone would call in a tip. Roman always followed it. Saber always came with him. And every single time, it led nowhere. But Roman never gave up. Because deep down, he didn't believe Leo and Maya were dead. Not yet. Before we continue, if you're as haunted by this story as Roman was, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You won't believe what happens 10 years later when a jailed petty criminal accidentally mentions a forgotten name from the past. Because the truth? Leo and Maya weren't the only ones. October 2008, 10 years later. The walls in Roman's office had changed over the years, new commendations, new cases, newer crime scene maps, but one thing never moved. Tacked to the corkboard above his desk were 2 sun-faded school portraits. Leo, age 8. Maya, age 6. Smiling in matching blue uniforms. Oblivious to the darkness that had taken them. It had been a decade since they disappeared from Havenwood Elementary. 10 years without a trace. No ransom. No sightings. No arrests. Just 2 missing children in a town that had quietly moved on. Everyone, that is, except Roman. Now a seasoned detective with graying hair at the temples, Roman had investigated murders, drug rings, and arsons. But the Thompson case was different. It wasn't just unsolved, it was unfinished. He'd chased every tip, no matter how ridiculous. Even after Saber officially retired 2 years earlier, Roman would bring him along to sniff evidence, just in case. He never let it go. Neither did Saber. The old German shepherd had slowed down. His fur had dulled, and his hearing wasn't what it used to be. But when Roman opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a sealed plastic evidence bag, Saber perked up. Inside was the butterfly hair clip. The only real clue they'd ever found. Roman didn't know why he kept it close, some people called it sentiment, others obsession. He didn't care. That clip meant something. And someday, he believed, it would lead them somewhere. That somewhere came from the unlikeliest source. It was late fall when a U.S. Marshal from Arizona called. They'd arrested a man named Arturo Flores, a low-level con artist picked up for a string of identity thefts and check fraud. During his interrogation, Flores offered to trade information for leniency. Said he used to work in the shadows years ago, running deliveries for people who didn't like their names on paperwork. At first, it sounded like nonsense. But then Flores mentioned something that made the marshal sit up. He talked about a child trafficking ring based in Northern California. Said he once helped pick up kids from a schoolyard. Somewhere rural. Peaceful. He couldn't remember the exact town, but the date? Around the late 90s. The marshal passed the tip along to Havenwood PD. Roman was on the next flight to Phoenix. Flores looked like every other petty criminal Roman had interviewed over the years. Greasy hair. Darting eyes. Yellowing teeth. But behind the nervous act, Roman sensed something else, fear. The kind that comes from knowing too much. Roman didn't waste time. "Do the names Leo and Maya Thompson mean anything to you?" he asked, sliding 2 photographs across the table. Flores leaned forward. Stared. Then shook his head. No, man. I didn't know names. That wasn't my job. I was just the driver. Roman kept his voice even. Then tell me what you do know. According to Flores, there were people, professionals, who ran the operation. They scouted schools for vulnerable kids, siblings, latchkey kids, children from normal families, who wouldn't expect danger. Once they had a target, a female operative, someone the kids wouldn't see as threatening, would make contact. Roman's stomach turned. Did you ever work with her? He asked. Flores nodded. Name was Rita Vance. Real smooth talker. Blonde. Maybe in her 30s back then. Drove a blue Honda. She had a way of getting kids to follow her without even touching them. Roman jotted down the name. And Leo and Maya? Flores hesitated. I was told not to ask questions. But the pickup that week, it felt different. The kids weren't being held for ransom. It was a special order. A high-paying client. Big money. I dropped them near a warehouse outside of Reading. That was it. After that, I was paid and told to disappear. Roman leaned forward. Do you realize what you're saying? I do now, Flores mumbled. Back then, I thought they were just being sent overseas. But now, man, I don't know. I hear stories about what happened to some of those kids. I don't sleep good. Back in California, Roman sat alone in the evidence room, staring at the clip again. A special order. The phrase hit him like a brick to the chest. If Flores was telling the truth, Leo and Maya hadn't been lost in a random crime, they'd been selected. That made it worse. He opened Saber's crate. The old dog sniffed the air and looked up expectantly. Roman held the bag toward him. Saber took one whiff and growled. That growl hadn't come out of him in years. The department reclassified the Thompson file from cold case to active investigation. Roman pulled every archived report on Rita Vance, school records, DMV, old rental addresses. Her trail had gone dark around 2000. She'd vanished. But Roman wasn't giving up. Not now. He called the FBI's Human Trafficking Task Force and shared everything. Flores's statement. The description of Rita. The phrase, special order. The agents listened. And they agreed, this wasn't a one-off kidnapping. This was a network. Roman barely slept the next few nights. His thoughts kept circling the same questions. Why those kids? Who ordered them? And how deep did this go? There were no answers yet, only a name. Rita Vance. But it was more than he had in a decade. Rita Vance didn't look like someone who could ruin lives. She lived in a quiet suburb outside Eugene, Oregon. Her lawn was neatly trimmed, her curtains always drawn. To her neighbors, she was just another middle-aged woman with a tendency to keep to herself and shop online too much. No one would have guessed she used to be part of something much darker. Roman stood on the sidewalk, watching the house from his unmarked car. It was a far cry from Havenwood. Rain drizzled steadily, turning the gutters into tiny rivers. But this lead, this woman, had ties to a network that might have been responsible for far more than just Leo and Maya. He tapped the photo in his hand, a mugshot of Rita from 15 years ago. Back then, she'd been picked up on fraud charges in Nevada. The record was thin, but Arturo Flores had named her during his confession. She was the one who had placed the orders, whatever that meant. Roman stepped out of the car, his badge clipped to his belt, his coat pulled tight against the rain. He didn't bring Saber, his old partner was officially retired now, slow-moving with cloudy eyes and stiff legs. But when Roman turned to leave the precinct that morning, Saber had pushed his head into Roman's palm like he always did, as if giving silent permission. Inside the house, Rita wasn't what Roman expected. She didn't slam the door or deny who she was. She tried to play it off, polite smile, shaky hands, offering tea she never intended to pour. But something shifted when Roman pulled out a picture of Leo and Maya. Not a recent one, just that same old school photo, both kids with those gap-toothed grins and primary-colored backpacks. Rita's fingers trembled. Her smile faltered. She didn't ask who they were. Because she already knew. Back at the property, a team from the local PD secured a warrant and began a full search. Roman walked the perimeter while the rain poured down. Something didn't sit right with him. This woman wasn't the brains, she was a cog. A frightened one. Behind the house was an old storage shed. It looked abandoned, ivy-covered, rusted hinges, padlock hanging loose. Roman stepped closer. He called out to the officers. Together, they pried the door open. The smell hit first. Mold, dust, wood rot, and something else. Something faintly plastic and unnatural. Inside, they found what looked like an old storm shelter. A square hatch under a stack of carpeting. Roman's heart thumped as they pulled it open. Flashlights scanned the small underground room. It was only about 10 feet wide, with concrete walls and a low ceiling. On the far side, drawn in childlike scribbles, were stick figures and stars. A dusty teddy bear lay on its side in the corner. Broken crayons. An old backpack. Nobody said a word. They didn't have to. Rita crumbled under the weight of what they found. She didn't talk right away. Hours passed. She didn't ask for a lawyer. She didn't ask for water. Just stared at the wall in silence. Roman was patient. Eventually, she began to speak. Not with confidence, but like someone who had carried a secret too heavy for too long. It wasn't just one or two kids, she said, voice thin. It was dozens. From all over. I didn't take them. I just moved the names. Made the matches. Handed them off. She wouldn't say who ran it all. Claimed she didn't know. Only that everything was funneled through a person known only by a code name. The director, she whispered. No real name. No face. We never met him in person. Roman leaned forward. And Leo and Maya? The Thompson kids? That's when she hesitated. They were different, Rita said. They weren't supposed to go through the usual channels. Someone made a special request. Paid double. Maybe triple. I don't know who. Just that it was arranged through a broker. Roman's blood went cold. A special order. That changed everything. If this was a mass operation, and Leo and Maya had been pulled from it intentionally, that meant someone with influence had gone out of their way to acquire them. This wasn't about child labor or trafficking. This was about ownership. Control. Rita handed over what little she had, bank transfers, vague names, coded emails. But one name came up repeatedly in the wire transfers. Eleanor Morrison. A so-called consultant based out of Las Vegas. No criminal record. No digital fingerprints. A ghost. Roman took it all and boarded a red-eye flight back to California. His team at the department started digging. Back in Havenwood, the news hadn't reached the public yet. Clara Thompson still kept a light on in the front window every night, even though her house was now half empty and her husband lived in a rental across town. Roman didn't call them. Not yet. Not until he had something solid. Instead, he went home and sat in his den, staring at Saber's old collar on the shelf. 26 years. He still remembered that first day at the playground. The way Saber had whined and clawed at the grass. The way he had found Maya's butterfly hair clip buried in the weeds. Roman reached into his drawer and pulled the clip out again. The edges were still chipped, the color still bright. He'd never turned it in. Never logged it as official evidence. He didn't trust anyone else with it. At the precinct the next morning, the team had results. Eleanor Morrison had moved large sums of money, quietly, expertly, between 1993 and 2007. Most of it disappeared into shell corporations, dummy accounts, and offshore trusts. But they tracked one payment, marked only with the initials, SO, to a trust fund created in Orange County around the same time Leo and Maya vanished. Roman stared at the documents. This wasn't just a criminal network. It was a system. And someone had used it to steal 2 children and give them to a family that could cover its tracks. He didn't know where the road would end. Not yet. But he knew where it would lead next. Las Vegas. And the woman who once brokered children like commodities. By 2017, most people had long stopped talking about the Thompson case. The school had remodeled its playground. The old fence with the hole had been replaced with a bright new security gate. Teachers retired. New families moved to Havenwood. But Roman, he never moved on. Saber had passed away 2 years earlier. Roman buried him under the old oak tree behind his house, marked the spot with a flat stone and a badge. After Saber, things weren't the same. Roman still wore the same department-issued gun and badge, but the case had carved something out of him. He didn't laugh much. Didn't bother with birthdays or long weekends. He just kept chasing ghosts. Then came the break he'd waited nearly 2 decades for. An FBI analyst working cold case data had discovered an odd financial trail. Bank wires, cryptic donations to shell charities, and overlapping names from past adoption filings. Roman was called into a cross-agency briefing in Sacramento. Among the dozen files laid out, one stood out, a woman named Eleanor Morrison, flagged as a suspected intermediary in illegal private adoptions, someone who had moved kids, off the record, for wealthy clients. Roman leaned in closer when he saw the years listed in the file, 1997 to 2001. There was one transfer, subtle, almost buried, that linked her to an anonymous payment near Havenwood, dated just 1 week after Leo and Maya vanished. It wasn't a name he'd seen before. But it was enough. Eleanor Morrison was 78 and living in a luxury senior care facility in Henderson, Nevada, just outside Las Vegas. Roman drove the full 9 hours himself, no plane, no delays. Just him, the road, and Saber's old collar hanging from his rearview mirror. The facility was white-walled, sterile, and smelled of bleach and lavender. A young nurse led Roman down the hallway to a private room with a window overlooking a fake waterfall. Eleanor was seated in a wheelchair, staring at nothing in particular. Her silver hair was pinned neatly, her makeup lightly applied. She looked like someone's grandmother, harmless. But Roman had read the file. This woman wasn't harmless. She was methodical, cunning, and dangerous when she had all her faculties. The problem was, she no longer did. "Mrs. Morrison," Roman said softly, pulling up a chair. "My name is Roman. I'm a detective from Northern California. I'd like to ask you about some children." She blinked slowly. Then smiled. "What year is it?" she asked him. Roman's heart sank. Over the next 40 minutes, she repeated herself 6 times. She thought he was her nephew. Then a pastor. Then someone there to sell her insurance. When Roman showed her photos of Maya and Leo, she stared at them blankly. The records were right. Eleanor was deep into advanced dementia. She wasn't faking it. Her mind was gone. Back in the parking lot, Roman sat behind the wheel, fists clenched around the steering wheel. He felt it, the frustration, the bitterness. He was so close, and it slipped through his fingers again. Saber would have barked at him for even thinking of quitting. That's when his phone buzzed. It was the FBI analyst again. Eleanor had a son, she said. David Morrison. Successful tech investor. Hasn't spoken to his mother in over 10 years, but, get this, he's still paying for the facility. Roman sat up. Where is he? Santa Barbara. Lives under a trust, but the paper trail is clean. David Morrison didn't answer the door the first time. Roman waited across the street in his car until the lights came back on. He introduced himself the next morning, badge, no dramatics. David looked nothing like his mother. He was mid-40s, calm, well-dressed. The kind of man who'd made money young and didn't need to flaunt it. He listened in silence as Roman explained who he was. I don't know what my mother did, David finally said. But I always had a feeling there were things she wasn't proud of. Roman stayed quiet. David disappeared into a back room and returned a minute later with a silver key in his hand. She gave me this when I was in college, he said. Told me to keep it safe in case anything ever happened to her. I never opened it. Roman took the key, heart hammering. It belonged to a safe deposit box. Inside a Las Vegas bank vault 2 days later, Roman opened the box under federal warrant. No cash. No jewelry. Just one black leather-bound notebook, one USB flash drive, and a folder marked, Private Arrangements. The notebook contained a handwritten index, dates, transaction codes, and first names. All women. Some had dollar amounts next to them. Some had only cities. Some had check marks. The USB held a digital version of the same list, along with encrypted files. The folder? Inside were birth certificates, falsified. Fake names, fake dates. But there was one record from 1998. 2 siblings, adopted by a couple in Southern California. Their birth names were unreadable beneath the redaction tape, but the family who adopted them was listed clearly. Charles and Deirdre Donnelly, Orange County. Roman's breath caught. A real couple. Real address. No criminal record. The kind of people you'd see at a PTA fundraiser or driving their kids to tennis lessons. He called Clara Thompson that night. Her voice cracked when she answered. Mark had moved out years ago. They still talked, but barely. She never changed her number, just in case. Roman told her he had a lead. Is it them? She whispered. Is it really them? I don't know yet, Roman said honestly. But it's the closest we've ever been. After 26 years, he was finally holding a thread that felt solid. The Donnellys had 2 kids, Michael and Sarah, born roughly 2 years apart. On paper, everything checked out. They were college-aged now. Honors students. Volunteered with youth groups. The kind of kids you'd be proud to call your own. But Roman didn't care about their perfect transcripts. He wanted proof. Real proof. And if Eleanor Morrison's ledger was correct, he was about to find it. By 2024, the Thompson case had been buried under 2 decades of new crimes, tragedies, and shifting public interest. But for Roman, the dust never settled. He still kept that butterfly hair clip in a locked drawer beside his desk. Saber's old collar sat right next to it. After Eleanor Morrison's death and her son David's reluctant cooperation, Roman finally had what he'd been chasing all these years, a breakthrough. It wasn't a confession or a photograph. It was a small steel safety deposit box full of disorganized chaos, ledgers, receipts, hand-scribbled notes, and encoded files stored on ancient USB drives. Eleanor Morrison had been meticulous, even in her criminality. She didn't trust digital footprints, and much of her record-keeping was deliberately encrypted. Names were replaced by codes, dates by symbols. It was a tangled mess of numbers and aliases. But buried in it was the truth. The FBI's cyber division in Quantico assigned a full-time analyst to the files. A quiet man named Lane, barely 30, with thick glasses and a nervous habit of chewing pen caps. It took Lane 3 months and a custom decryption tool to begin making sense of the ledgers. They discovered patterns. Payments spaced exactly 3 months apart. Names replaced with numeric identifiers. Travel logs, fake birth certificates, and international wire transfers. Dozens of adoption-like transactions, many involving children under 10. Then came the find Roman had been hoping for. One entry from late 1998 caught Lane's attention: 2 children, both listed as siblings, transferred within 36 hours of each other. A note marked them as special class placement. No destination listed. But the code for the broker? EMV. Eleanor Morrison, Vegas. Roman leaned in closer. The log tied that special class placement to a specific fund transfer, $250,000 wired from a shell company that had once belonged to a real estate developer named Gregory Donnelly, based in Orange County, California. Married. No children on record at the time. The same year, court documents confirmed Gregory and his wife received full legal custody of 2 children, Michael and Sarah, through a private international adoption. There was no doubt in Roman's mind anymore. This wasn't a coincidence. These were the children he'd been looking for. Leo and Maya Thompson. The Donnellys were now living in a gated community near Newport Beach. Gregory had passed away in 2020 from cancer. His wife, Janine, was still alive, known locally for philanthropy and church events. On paper, Michael and Sarah were now 34 and 32, both with college degrees and successful careers. Roman sat in his car for a long time in front of their house. He looked at the neatly trimmed lawn, the 2-car garage, the flower baskets hanging from the porch. It looked like something out of a Hallmark movie. He didn't see any ghosts here. But he also knew appearances were a lie. That house had been built on stolen lives. He didn't knock. Instead, he returned to his office, opened his laptop, and did what any modern detective would do: he searched their names on social media. Sarah Donnelly had an active profile. Photos of brunches, book clubs, charity fundraisers. Friends tagged her in dozens of events. Her smile looked bright and unburdened. Roman scrolled through the photos, searching for something, anything, that might connect her to Maya. Then he found it. A photo from 2019. Sarah standing next to a friend at a vineyard in Napa. She wore a simple blue dress and around her neck, a butterfly pendant. Tiny. Delicate. Blue. Just like the hair clip from 1998. Roman stared at the screen for several minutes. Coincidence? Maybe. But in his gut, he didn't think so. With approval from the state attorney, the Donnellys were contacted through their legal counsel. The meeting took place not at their home, but in a neutral law firm office in Los Angeles. The state needed their cooperation. Janine Donnelly showed up with her children, now grown adults. Michael, lean with dark hair and sharp features, was polite but guarded. Sarah was calm, almost detached. They didn't know why they were there, only that something serious was being investigated. Roman sat across from them, clutching a folder in his lap. He explained the situation plainly. No dramatics. No accusations. Just the facts. There's a possibility, Roman said carefully, that you were both adopted through an illegal broker. That your birth names were Leo and Maya Thompson. Janine gasped. That's absurd. Michael leaned forward. We have our adoption papers. Roman nodded. I believe you. But I also believe those papers were forged. He slid a document across the table. It was the DNA consent form. Sarah glanced at it, then at her mother. What happens if we say no? Then the case goes unresolved, Roman said, looking her directly in the eyes. But if you say yes, we may finally bring closure to a family that's been living with a nightmare for 26 years. There was a long silence. Then Michael picked up a pen. 2 weeks later, the results came back. The lab report confirmed a 99.9% DNA match between Sarah Donnelly and Clara Thompson. The same with Michael and Mark. There was no room for doubt. Sarah and Michael were Leo and Maya. Roman didn't sleep that night. He drove up to Havenwood early the next morning and sat for an hour outside the Thompson home. Mark and Clara still lived there, though they barely spoke to each other anymore. Their lives had diverged but never truly separated. Some griefs just won't let go. He didn't want to tell them over the phone. Clara opened the door, startled to see him. She looked older, thinner, but her eyes still carried the same quiet sorrow he remembered. "We found them," Roman said. Her knees gave out. Roman caught her before she hit the floor. News of the discovery rippled through Havenwood like thunder. The school put up a memorial plaque. Journalists called non-stop. Everyone wanted to know how 2 missing kids could turn up alive after all this time. But Roman didn't do interviews. He didn't want credit. He only wanted the truth to be known. There was still one thing left that haunted him. Why the Thompsons? Why had those kids been chosen? And who had known them well enough to lure them away so easily? That final answer was coming, and it would be the most painful truth of all. Roman had stared down gang leaders, smugglers, and murderers in his time. He'd seen evil wear every kind of face. But nothing unsettled him more than the awkward silence that filled the lawyer's conference room the day Leo and Maya met their birth parents again. It had been 26 years since the Thompson kids vanished from that elementary school playground. Now they sat across the table from Mark and Clara, adults, not children. Sarah Donnelly wore a blazer and pearls. Michael had the lean build of a college athlete. They looked nothing like the photos Roman kept on the board in his office. And they had no memory of the people sitting across from them. None. Clara's hands trembled in her lap. Mark tried to speak twice and couldn't. The Donnellys, the couple who had raised the children, sat beside them, equally stunned. Their world had been shattered in the span of a week. It wasn't a joyful reunion. It wasn't tears and hugs. It was legal paperwork, awkward glances, and a suffocating tension no one knew how to break. The Donnellys hadn't known. That was clear. They were wealthy, yes. Connected? Maybe. But they hadn't orchestrated the abduction. They'd filed adoption papers. The paperwork was fake, but the love? That had been real. Sarah called them Mom and Dad. So did Michael. And that wasn't going to change overnight. Mark excused himself halfway through the meeting. He stepped into the hallway, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. Clara followed a minute later. Roman watched through the glass, his chest tight. He knew what they were thinking. They found their children, but they hadn't really gotten them back. Roman couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. The puzzle was almost complete, but not quite. One thing gnawed at him. Why them? There were dozens of kids who went missing during that time. Why were Leo and Maya part of a special order? Why that family? It wasn't just about money. Something felt personal. Back at his office, Roman pulled out every file again. Notes, timelines, statements. Then he opened the sealed folder with Eleanor Morrison's contact lists, the ones they'd decrypted after her death. One name jumped out. It was buried deep in an email log, almost nothing. But it was there. Angela Summers. Roman's eyes narrowed. He hadn't heard that name in years. Angela was Clara Thompson's younger sister. She used to live in Havenwood. Moved away right around the time the kids disappeared. There had been whispers of family tension, jealousy, rivalry, but no one thought anything of it back then. Angela was the wild one, the sister who skipped town, never came to holidays, never called. Roman dug deeper. Phone records, old bank transfers, traced rental addresses. Everything pointed to one undeniable truth: Angela had maintained contact with Eleanor Morrison. Not once. Repeatedly. He knocked on her door 2 days later. Angela lived in Sacramento now, in a tidy condo with fake plants on the porch and motivational quotes framed on the walls. She answered wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt. She didn't recognize him at first. Then she saw the badge. "You're here about them, aren't you?" Roman said nothing. Just waited. Angela laughed nervously. "Took you long enough." What followed was a confession, but not the kind Roman had prepared for. Angela hadn't seen it as a crime, not at first. She'd convinced herself it was an opportunity. A way to give Leo and Maya a better life. The Donnellys were rich, cultured, able to give the children everything Mark and Clara couldn't. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone," she said, pouring herself a glass of wine with shaking hands. "I was trying to fix what was broken." "What was broken?" Roman asked. "My sister's life," Angela snapped. "You think she was happy? Stuck in that dead-end town with a husband who barely looked at her? She was drowning, and no one noticed. Not even you." Roman felt his jaw tighten. Angela admitted she had lured the kids to the back fence that day. She told them she had a surprise. Said their mom was waiting. They trusted her, why wouldn't they? Then a man in a dark car drove them away. Angela didn't know what happened after that. She'd never seen the kids again. She got paid, enough to move, enough to disappear. But it hadn't been enough to forget. Angela was arrested that night. Roman personally informed Clara. She didn't speak. Just stared blankly, then turned to face the window. Mark asked only one question: why would she do this to us? There was no good answer. The betrayal didn't come from strangers. It came from family. In the weeks that followed, the media exploded. Havenwood was back in the headlines. Old wounds were ripped open. Families across the country revisited cold cases. More evidence came out about Eleanor Morrison's adoption-for-profit scheme. More names. More stories. But for Roman, the case was finally over. He stood alone in the small cemetery outside of town, where Saber was buried under a tall oak tree. Roman placed a fresh badge beside the headstone, a replica of his own, polished and new. "We found them, boy," he whispered. "We finally found them." His voice cracked slightly. "You were right all along." He stood there in silence for a long time, wind rustling the leaves above. A few yards away, someone had left a butterfly hair clip on the grass. Faded, chipped, but still blue. Roman smiled. He turned and walked away, finally able to let go. Thank you for watching the Havenwood Ghosts. This was a story about patience, loyalty, and how sometimes the most painful answers come from the people closest to us. Yellow circle: what would you have done if you were in Roman's shoes? Yellow circle: do you think Michael and Sarah should return to the Thompson family, or stay loyal to the Donnellys? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if it moved you. We've got more powerful stories coming soon, stay with us.